This is Jim Cason with Riverbend Baptist Church, Riverbend, North Carolina. Continuing our series in the biblical significant battle. And this is being recorded on the 25th of June for the 28th of June. Last week we looked at David's coronation and David going to work for Saul. And we also, in chapter 17, in the first part of it, got into this war with the Philistines, where the Philistines were on one hill on the side of a valley. The Israelis were on a hill on the other side of the valley, being led by King Saul. And, as it put it, going back, a champion went out, verse 4, from the camp of the Philistines named Goliath, from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. That's like between 9 and 10 feet. And the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze, and he had bronze armor on his legs and a bronze javelin between his shoulders. And the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his iron spearhead weighed 600 shekels. And a shield bearer went out before him. Now, why are we looking at this? We're looking at this really because it really does show a significant battle, not only the battle between Goliath and David, but it shows something that tries to attack us frequently. There are Goliaths that come against you in your life. Now, you may not call them by that name, but obviously there's a lot of things that our enemy Satan brings against us. Discouragement's one of them, because he comes for only 3 reasons: to kill, to steal, and to destroy. But another one is discouragement. Now, if he can get us to where we were like the Israelites were when they sent out the 12 spies and 10 of them came back and brought a bad report of the land of Israel, and they felt like grasshoppers against those giants that were in Canaan. Well, we have to fight giants too, and I got news for you. If you're saved, if you know the Lord, and you don't fight the giants, you're not really going to have the life down here that you ought to have. You're going to have a whole lot more trouble, even than if you do fight. And you're going to be discouraged constantly. You're going to lose battles constantly, and you just won't develop the way that you're supposed to. So let's find out what Goliath had to say here. Verse 8. He stood out and cried to the armies of Israel and said, "Why have you come out to line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and you the servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourself, and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us." And the Philistine said, "I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together." When Saul and all Israel heard the words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Okay, so this guy is a pretty good-sized dude. That doesn't necessarily mean he can't be beat. There's been an awful lot of times in battles between men that the little guy won. Maybe he was more agile, maybe he just knew how to fight better. But this guy did have, he had some past victories. He had some times when he had won and everything. And he is like one of the big things that Satan tries to bring against us. He's a braggart. He's a blowhard. He's proud of himself. And furthermore, he's a huffing and a puffing. He's just coming right out and saying, "Y'all are going to do what I want or else." And so, these people, all of Israel, they're greatly afraid. They're scared. Now, how much chance do you have of winning if you're really totally scared? The difference between a coward in a battle in our military and a very brave man that might win a medal is they are both scared. It would be ridiculous not to be. But the coward runs away from what he ought to do. The other person not only does it, he does it with excellence. Now, continuing on with this, we're starting with verse 17. Now, there's a little section in between there David's father had just directed him to leave the sheep, so apparently they were going to be taken care of, and to go down and to carry some supplies and food to the army, and in particular to his other sons. So, we're leading off with verse 20 of 1 Samuel 17. David rose early in the morning. He left the sheep with a keeper. There you go. And he took the things and went as Jesse had commanded him. Very important. We'll see why a little later. And he came to the camp as the army was going out into the fight and shouting for battle. For Israel and the Philistines had drawn up in battle array, army against army. They did this every day, by the way. Every single day. The Philistines came up, the Israelis came up, and this big guy named Goliath came up. And it had been going on for a while. Verse 22. David left his supplies in the hand of the supply keeper. He ran to the army, and he came and greeted his brothers. That's good. And then he was talking with them, verse 23 says. And that was when Goliath decided to make his challenge for the day. So this is the first time David has heard this. So continuing on, as he talked with them, there was the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, coming up from the armies of the Philistines. And he spoke according to those same words. Those words were mentioned back in verse 8 through 11. So David heard them. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him, and they were dreadfully afraid. So the men of Israel said, Have you seen this man who has come up? Surely he's come up to defy Israel, and it shall be that the man who kills him, the king will enrich with great riches, and will give him his daughter, and give him his father's house exemption from taxes in Israel. And if you knew how much Saul taxed, the IRS were amateurs compared to Saul. Verse 26. Then David spoke to the men who stood by him, saying, What shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away some reproach for Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? Now that is the big thing that nobody else, including Saul and all the army, was thinking about. They had asked God about fighting the Philistines. God had told them they were going to win. He didn't tell them exactly when, but he told them they were going to win. But they did not have the faith to believe it. When this big dude came out and just taunted them and blew hard and yap this and yap that, and I'm going to take care of you, I'm going to just wipe you out. Well, David comes up and says, Who is this turkey? He comes up and defies God, not just man. Now, moving on to verse 28. Now Eliab, his oldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men, and Eliab's anger was aroused against David, and he said, Why did you come down here? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your pride and the insolence of your heart, for you have come down to see the battle. This is also a big key now today. When everything's going along according to the world and all the people, including a lot of the Christian people, are scared to death and they're not really standing up, and you decide, I'm going to stand up, then you stand up just about like Daniel's 3 good buddies stood up in front of that couple of million people that was bowing down before Nebuchadnezzar's idol. Remember that? So you stand up from there, and somebody, usually one of your brothers, and I don't necessarily mean your blood brothers, I mean your spiritual brothers or sisters, is going to come up and start putting you down because you don't have the fear that they have. They really are speaking a volume about themselves rather than about you. Verse 29, David said, What have I done now? Is there not a cause? Then he turned from him towards another and said the same thing, and these people answered him as the first ones did. Okay. Alrighty, so he's getting discouraged from everybody he talks to. Verse 31. But he is talking. He's talking loudly, and he's being heard. Now, when the words which David spoke were heard, they reported them to Saul, and he sent for him. And then David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine. And Saul looks at David. Saul's a lot bigger than David. Goliath's a lot bigger than Saul. Saul says in verse 33, you are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are a youth, and he is a man of war from his youth. You young Christians, and I'm not talking about young in age, I'm talking about young in the Lord. That is another tactic that the enemy will use against you. You're a youth, and this thing that you're going against is a man of war. Verse 34. David said to Saul, your servant used to keep his father's sheep, and when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went out after it and struck it and delivered the lamb from its mouth, and when it arose against me, I caught it by its beard and struck and killed it. Man, you think about it. Killing a lion, and even more killing a bear. Man, the average bear weighs between 600 and 1,200 pounds. And David killed it. Not only that, he killed it quickly enough the lamb got delivered. Verse 36, your servant has killed both lion and bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, seeing he has defied the armies of the living God. Moreover, David said, the Lord, who delivered me from the jaw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said to David, go, and the Lord be with you. And the scripture from that point goes on a little further, and it talks about Saul offering David his armor. And David kind of picked up a piece of it and said, hey, I appreciate it, but I haven't tested this out. I'm not used to doing this kind of way of fighting. I'd really rather do it my way. And that was right. Verse 40. Then he took his staff in his hand, and he chose for himself 5 smooth stones from the brook, and put them in a shepherd's bag in a pouch which he had, and his sling was in his hand. Yeah, a slingshot. A pretty good strong slingshot, but a slingshot. And he drew near to the Philistine. Now remember, the Philistine's got a spear. The Philistine's got a great big sword. That spear can be a fairly good distance weapon, but the sword and his hands and his ability to wrestle are a close-up weapon. Well, David has got something here. He's kind of like some of these southern folk that'll climb 30 foot up a tree and sit there all day when hunting season is on just so they can kill something. They'll shoot it from 500 yards away and get it on the first round. We're going to find that out. So, what happens here? The Philistine came near. He started drawing near to David, and the man who bore the shield went before him. That's kind of an aside, but it's kind of interesting. I mean, I would have figured if he was all that big and all that strong, he could have lifted up his shield by himself, but he didn't. But he's still mouthy. Verse 43. So the Philistine said to David, Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks? Didn't give David time to answer, which is probably good, because he might have called him a dog or even something even more uncomplimentary. And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. Oh my. You'll have that happen to you too if you fight for the Lord. You'll be cursed, and some of them won't know the names of the gods, but they will actually be cursing you in the names of Baal and Ashtoreth and the others that are all false gods. But if you stick in there with it and you do what God tells you to do, they're not going to win. So, verse 44, the Philistine kept on mouthing. He said to David, Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. Then David said to the Philistine, "You come to me with a sword, with a spear, and with a javelin." David was practiced, by the way. If you go back and read a little bit earlier, he was practicing the art of evading javelins from Saul. "But I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you. And this day I will give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And then all this assembly shall know that the Lord does not save with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands." So it was, when the Philistine arose and came and drew nearer to meet David, that David hurried and ran towards the army to meet the Philistine. Then David put his hand in his bag, took out a stone, and he slung it and struck the Philistine in his forehead, so that the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell on his face to the earth. You do realize when he hit him up on the forehead, that actually means that stone had to hit hard enough to crush the bone behind the skin in order to sink in far enough to do major damage to the brain and pretty much kill him instantly. So, verse 50, David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and he struck the Philistine and killed him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. He could have had Saul's sword, he just didn't want it, he didn't feel like he needed it. So kind of like the old principle of why carry a knife to a gunfight. So, we keep on going. Verse 51, therefore David ran and stood over the Philistine, took his sword, that big sword, and drew it out of his sheath and killed him and cut off his head with it. And when the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled. And little children, that's what happens when you let the Lord fight the battle for you in his strength, and you go against the principalities and the powers of the air and the evil that's in the high places. And boy, there is a bunch of it in the high places on this planet. That's what we're studying today. I usually like to close with prayer, and first I'm going to mention some people in our local congregation that we'd appreciate prayer for. Maddie Jones and Shelby Gordon and Olivia McGew are all healing from recent surgeries. At this time they seem to be doing well. Lewis Ames, who's feeling a bit better as he begins his cancer treatment, and his wife and son. Doug and Rosalind Locklear, as Rosalind helps Doug and Doug is trying to keep on going. The Probst family that's been there a long time. Couple of ladies that are older that are in nursing homes, Joanne Jodon and Evelyn Irwin. They're being isolated due to the pandemic and these regulations that our government has put. And to all the government leaders, not just in the U.S. but around the world, the rulers in the nations, the rulers in the provinces or states as it may be, the rulers in the counties, the rulers right down into the city level, for godly wisdom, even those that right now don't really know him, but that they may be exercised by godly wisdom and depart from their political decisions. It is more important by far to do what God wants to do than it is to perk up your chances for re-election the next time. And also for our individuals that are being hurt and destroyed by forced unemployment, and the businesses that are still closed that are being hurt and may go out of business as a result of this. And Lord, I've just listed all this in prayer now. Father, I praise your name. I praise the victory that comes with your name. I praise the idea that you're teaching me on spiritual welfare, and even as I'm teaching it, I'm learning from the book that David Jeremiah wrote to help me learn how to do better on spiritual warfare. And I thank you for Jesus. I thank you for salvation, and I thank you especially for drawing us near and bringing us closer to you. Amen. Have a blessed day.